The story opens under the silent, starry canopy of the night sky in the Theris Kingdom, overlooking the secluded and quiet settlement known as Ratville. Yet, on this particular evening, the peaceful atmosphere of the rustic village is completely shattered by an undeniable sense of mounting panic. Torches flicker frantically through the narrow, unpaved streets as distressed villagers scramble back and forth in a desperate search for something precious that has vanished without a trace. A crying woman collapses in sorrow, comforted by a neighbor, while the village elder wipes sweat from his brow in sheer exhaustion, terrified that another day has been completely wasted with zero clues to show for their efforts. Just as despair begins to settle over the crowd, a cloaked traveler quietly wanders into the town square, asking if there is an inn where he might rest for the night. Overwhelmed by their own crisis, the stressed villagers immediately turn him away, telling him that the village is currently dealing with serious trouble and urging him to move on to the next town. Instead of leaving, the traveler casually pushes back his hood, brushing away his dark hair to reveal a single hanging earring and a rather strange, derpy blue bird perched comfortably on his shoulder. With a confident smirk, the stranger interrupts their frantic, hushed whispers by offering his assistance, declaring that he hears they are looking for something and believes he can solve their problem. When the skeptical villagers question his identity, the traveler dramatically throws open his arms as glowing feathers swirl around him in a theatrical display, introducing himself as none other than the legendary Wind Mage. The elder looks at him with utter disbelief, flatly rejecting the offer and stating that they have no time for deluded wanderers. Sighing dramatically alongside his bluebird, the traveler asks if they even comprehend what a true mage is. When a village woman nervously replies that she only heard childhood rumors about mages being dangerous monsters, the stranger immediately shuts her down, holding out his open palms radiant, sparkling mana ignites beneath the moonlight. He grandly proclaims that a true mage is an extraordinary force of nature, capable of wielding incomprehensible magic to levitate house-sized boulders, alter the flow of raging rivers, and perform miraculous healing spells that breathe life back into those on the very brink of death. He goes on to explain that among all forms of magic, spirit magic is the rarest and most revered art, allowing a contractor to command elemental forces through bonds with nature spirits. Claiming to be a master who commands the wind, spirits themselves, he boasts that there is nowhere in the world his airy reach cannot touch. Yet, when the villagers remain hesitant, asking why such an incredible archmage would waste his time helping an obscure, impoverished backwater town, the hero's grand persona momentarily cracks. He facepalms in hilarious defeat, complaining about their total lack of world awareness before launching into a historical hall of fame. He lists legendary figures recorded in stained glass history, including Alex Magellan, the archmage who once protected the entire kingdom, Mahatma, the saint loved by the gods, and Karuna, the guardian of mages. He finishes by hyping up the famous gray-haired mercenary who travels alongside a bluebird, getting any job done for those in distress. Upon hearing this rumor, a villager's eyes light up in recognition, prompting the traveler to pose heroically and smugly take credit. However, the grandeur instantly drops as he flashes a greedy, sparkling cash gesture, revealing his true condition. As a mercenary, he will gladly make their troubles his own, provided they show appropriate financial appreciation. Driven by sheer desperation, the panicked villagers scramble to pool their life savings together while the stranger calls out after them, reminding them that urgent emergency requests require a hefty additional fee. But as the crowd scatters to gather their coin, the camera shifts to a tall, silent figure, clad in a dark hood, watching the stranger's entire theatrical performance from the shadows with an unreadable, intense gaze. The scene shifts abruptly to the interior of a dimly lit room where the self-proclaimed hero reveals his true colors in a shocking plot twist. Holding a bulging leather pouch, the man greedily dumps a sparkling pile of gold coins onto the table, chuckling maliciously to himself as he counts the fortune he just extracted from the naive villagers. Grabbed by greed, he scoops the gold back into his bag, grabs his caged bluebird, and quietly slides out of an upper-story window into the cool night air to make a clean escape. Sliding down the roof, the scammer sneers under his breath, dismissing any slight pang of guilt by convincing himself that the villagers only have their own foolish naivety to blame. But, just as he takes his first confident step toward the tree line, a cold, authoritative voice pierces through the darkness, commanding him to stop right where he is. The scammer freezes in his tracks, turning his head in shock to see the mysterious hooded figure from earlier stepping out from behind the dark trees. The stranger extends a calm hand under the moonlight, demanding to know where the fraud is going in such a rush and ordering him to return every last coin to the villagers if he has no intention of fulfilling the contract. Realizing his getaway has been compromised, the scammer's nervous sweat instantly transforms into an arrogant sneer. Dropping his birdcage to the dirt with a heavy thud, the fraud decides to eliminate the lone witness, warning the stranger to mind his own business before declaring that he is in a hurry and intends to make this quick. Purple magic circles flare into existence around the scammer's hands, crackling with raw offensive energy as he incants a spell, screaming that while one shouldn't mess with a mage, he will gladly be the last mage the traveler ever sees. With a lethal roar, he unleashes his spell, launching a barrage of glowing purple project blades known as magic knife straight toward the stranger's chest. Yet the hooded traveler stands completely motionless in the path of the incoming spell. With an effortless, casual swish of his heavy cloak, an invisible current of wind erupts around him, effortlessly shattering every single magical blade into harmless sparkling dust like fragile glass. The scammer stumbles back in utter disbelief, gasping in horror as he tries to comprehend how a random traveler managed to brush off actual offensive magic with a mere flick of his wrist. Walking forward with complete composure, the hooded hero begins systematically deconstructing the fraud's entire act. He notes that while the scammer does indeed possess a real mana core capable of basic spellcasting, his performance in the village was nothing more than a cheap, embarrassingly fake circus trick. The hero reveals that the magical glowing lights used to impress the townspeople were simply ordinary forest fireflies drawn in by subtle pheromones, expressing deep embarrassment as a fellow practitioner that anyone would degrade the art of magic for such a petty scam. As the scammer trembles in horror at having his entire trick exposed, the small, ordinary parrot trapped inside the fallen cage begins frantically squawking, begging for help. Raising his hand with quiet authority, the hooded stranger addresses the fraud directly, declaring that the creature trapped in the cage is not a mere parrot, but the embodiment of the great wind itself. Snapping his fingers, the air temperature drops as a massive, roaring hurricane of brilliant, emerald mana erupts around the traveler's arm. The swirling green gale violently compresses and solidifies, materializing into a magnificent, radiant avian entity known as Spirit King Elkane. The fraud stumbles backward, dropping to his knees as cold sweat drenches his face, his eyes widening in absolute terror as he finally recognizes the true identity of the man standing before him. This is not just a traveler, but the genuine, legendary Wind Mage. However, instead of maintaining a grand and majestic presence, the newly summoned Spirit King immediately turns toward his contractor with a mocking smirk, telepathically roasting Lanian by joking that the scammer actually did a decent job mimicking his pathetic self. A hilarious comedic pause ensues as the fraud's mind completely breaks down over the fact that the spirit bird can talk, while the real Wind Mage maintains a deadpan, unbothered expression. Turning his attention back to the terrified con artist, Lanian offers a calm gesture of mercy, stating that if the fraud returns the stolen gold quietly, he will forgive him for the crime of impersonation. The scammer pauses, sweat dripping down his cheek as his mind frantically calculates a way out. Looking at Lanian's calm demeanor, the fraud suddenly recalls a memory from a past battlefield. A terrifying day when a single gray-haired mage managed to single-handedly decimate dozens of armed soldiers using chantless wind magic. Yet, as the scammer remembers that brutal battle, he also recalls a critical detail. Despite possessing power worth 100 men, not a single soldier lost their life to the Wind Mage that day. Concluding that Lanian is merely a soft-hearted idealist who refuses to kill out of half-baked sympathy, the scammer's fear turns back into malicious cunning. Slowly reaching behind his back, he slips his fingers around the hilt of a concealed, razor-sharp steel dagger. Pretending to surrender, the fraud puts on a fake, sheepish smile and holds out the heavy bag of gold, claiming he will give it back and reasoning in his head that soft guys like Lanian easily drop their guard when an enemy pretends to cooperate. Lanian steps forward and reaches out to take the bag, gently advising the man that someone with his capabilities should earn an honest living in the future rather than deceiving vulnerable people. But the exact moment Lanian takes the coin pouch, the scammer's face twists into a maniacal, murderous grin. Yanking out his hidden blade, he lunges forward with explosive speed, plunging the dagger straight toward Lanian's exposed throat while screaming at the top of his lungs that if he can close the distance, he wins. Even as the lethal steel blade inches toward his neck, the Wind Mage doesn't display a single trace of panic or surprise. As the lunging attacker closes in, glowing green mana ignites around Lanian's boots alongside a chillingly quiet response. If the scammer won't change his ways willingly, Lanian will simply have to make him feel like it. Instantly summoning a tiny glowing spirit sprite known as Lower Wind Spirit Ellie, Lanian channels a highly concentrated spell directly into the path of the incoming strike without shifting his posture. He casts Spiral, a vicious, high-speed drill of ultra-compressed atmospheric pressure that engulfs the scammer's arm in a violent vortex. In less than a fraction of a second, the swirling wind drill shatters the steel dagger, shreds the scammer's sleeve to ribbons, and brutally tears through the muscles of his forearm. The fraud lets out an agonizing, blood-curdling scream, collapsing to the dirt while clutching his mangled, bleeding arm in sheer agony. Standing over the writhing man, Lanian cold-bloodedly informs him that the localized pressure has completely disrupted his internal mana pathways, ensuring it will take a very long time before he can ever channel magic again. But before the fraud can process the pain, Lanian's hand shoots down, grabbing him firmly by the throat with a wind-infused grip that lifts the scammer off his feet. Heavy, terrifying shadows envelop Lanian's face, his eyes gleaming with a dark, murderous radiance that radiates pure malice. Leaning in close to the choking, gasping scammer, Lanian delivers a chilling ultimatum, warning him that if he ever pulls a scam like this again or dares to cross his path a second time, his neck will end up looking just like his shredded arm. Overwhelmed by absolute terror, the scammer gasps in agreement, scrambles wildly to his feet the second Lanian releases his grip and bolts into the pitch-black forest, screaming hysterically for his life as he disappears into the trees. Watching the fraud run away, Spirit King Elkane lands back on Lanian's shoulder, scolding his contractor for bothering to terrify a helpless opponent when he had no intention of killing him, calling Lanian far too soft. Lanian casually approaches the abandoned cage, unlatching the iron door to set his spirit companion free while quietly replying that scaring him away at least ensures the man will never scam innocent people in his name again. Flying up into the night sky, Elkane presses further, asking why Lanian doesn't just eliminate such threats permanently, as killing them would be far more effective. Lanian's expression softens into a solemn, dark melancholy as he gazes up at the glowing crescent moon. He turns to Elkane and solemnly reveals the heavy burden weighing on his soul. He takes mercenary contracts and helps defenseless people not out of heroics, but as a desperate attempt to seek atonement for the dark, blood-soaked path he is about to walk. Looking toward the horizon with a gaze full of cold, unwavering resolve, Lanian declares that he has no intention of adding to his sins by taking worthless lives. At least, not until he successfully tracks down and kills the specific man responsible for ruining his life.